You've been served. Those 3 words rang in my ears louder than any scream ever could. It was a quiet Thursday morning in my apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina. I had just brewed my coffee and was scrolling through work emails in my pajamas when the knock came. A man in a wrinkled blue jacket handed me a thick envelope and walked away before I could ask anything. Inside, the papers bore my name, Emily Carter. Bold and unmistakable. Default notice. $84,000 loan. Court summons in 21 days. My heart started racing. I'd never taken out a loan. I'd never even missed a credit card payment. For a moment, I wondered if it was identity theft. But then, a name jumped out from the paperwork. Co-signed by Martin and Rachel Carter. My parents. I stared at the page, my hand trembling. They used my name. And didn't tell me. I don't come from wealth. Not even comfort. But I was raised to believe that family was everything. I'm Emily Carter, 27 years old, a junior marketing analyst with a side hustle doing digital designs for Etsy. I've lived in Charlotte since I was born, and I've always been the girl who tried to do everything right. Good grades, scholarships, student jobs, helping with bills when I could. The dependable daughter. I guess I was the kind of girl who didn't question why, just quietly took on how. From the outside, people thought I had this loving, tight-knit family. My parents, Martin and Rachel Carter, were church-going, PTA-attending, friendly, smiling people. The kind that offered casseroles to neighbors and posted inspirational quotes on Facebook. But behind closed doors, things were always conditional. Growing up, I had one rule drilled into me. Family before self. Especially if it meant sacrificing for the greater good. I wasn't allowed to go to art school, even though my high school counselor said I had the portfolio to get a scholarship. Art's a hobby, not a future, my dad told me. Your family needs you to be realistic. So I went into marketing. Even when I got my job and started saving, my money wasn't always my own. My mom had a knack for borrowing. Just until the end of the month, sweetheart. You know your father's hours got cut. And my dad, he had this calm, manipulative tone. It's not like we're strangers. You're our daughter. Everything we do is for this family. So I kept helping. I paid off their overdue utility bills twice in college. I bought groceries when I could barely feed myself. I let them use my mailing address when they said they were having delivery issues. And every time I said yes, they made me feel like I was doing something noble. Like I was keeping the family afloat. Like I was loved for it. But deep down, I think I always feared the day I'd realize they weren't just leaning on me. They were using me. I remember one moment clearly. It was during my sophomore year at UNC Charlotte. I was visiting home for the weekend and my grandma Nana Mae was in town. She was my dad's mother, the only person who ever seemed to see through my parents' gloss. She and I were sitting on the porch, peeling apples for a pie, and she turned to me with her wrinkled hand on mine. Emily Sugar, you don't always owe people just because they gave you life.
I didn't understand it then.
I brushed it off. But now, I think she knew something, even I didn't. For years, I kept my head down and worked. No vacations. No online shopping sprees. No impulse buys. Every cent mattered. I built my credit, applied for a first-time homebuyer class, and dreamed of getting a condo by the lake someday. Nothing huge, just something that was mine. I was the girl who always planned, who checked interest rates, who used budget spreadsheets and tracked every dollar. So when that envelope showed up on my doorstep, when I saw my name attached to a giant loan I never approved, it felt like my whole identity collapsed. How could they, my parents, the people who raised me, take out a loan in my name? They knew how careful I was, how hard I'd worked to protect my future. I called them that night. At first, Mom acted confused. A loan? In your name? Are you sure it's not a scam, baby? Then Dad took the phone. And his voice wasn't surprised. It wasn't panicked. It was resigned. Like he'd been waiting for this day. Emily, we were going to tell you. We just needed time. We figured we could get ahead of the payments before you noticed. You used my social security number, I said flatly. Silence. Then, it's not like you were using your credit for anything big right now, right? That was when something inside me snapped. This wasn't desperation. It was entitlement. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't eat, couldn't focus at work. I kept rereading the documents, trying to make sense of it. The loan had been taken out 6 months ago. 6. And they hadn't missed one payment until last month. That's when it went into default. That's when the lender started reaching out. And that's when I started getting letters. They'd taken out $84,000, a home equity-style loan, under my name. And the collateral was my credit, my reputation, my dreams. I dug deeper, called the loan company, requested every document. The signature on the application? It looked like mine, but I never signed it. They had forged it. I spent that night crying in the shower, not because of the money, but because of the betrayal. I had always excused their behavior, always justified it in my mind. They were struggling. They didn't know better. They came from hard times. They weren't bad people. But this wasn't a mistake.
It was a choice.
A calculated, cruel choice. I visited Nana May's grave the next morning. I hadn't been there since her funeral 2 years ago. I brought her favorite, white carnations, and sat by the stone in silence. "You were right, Nana," I whispered. "You were so right." The wind was sharp that day, cutting through my jacket. But I felt oddly calm, like something was shifting, like this wasn't just the end of something. It was the beginning. That's when I decided I wouldn't be a victim. I'd be the one to turn the page. I made 3 calls that afternoon. 1, a consumer rights attorney. 2, my bank. 3, the local police fraud division. Because if they could use my name without consent, forge my signature, and bury me under a mountain of debt, then they could face the consequences. I wasn't sure what I was expecting when I first met with attorney Samuel Clark, but his office smelled like lavender and old books, and for some reason, that brought me a strange sense of peace. He was in his late 40s, calm-eyed, and wore a wedding ring that he absent-mindedly twisted whenever he listened deeply. After hearing my story and reviewing the documents, he looked up at me and said plainly, "Emily, this is fraud, and your parents committed a federal crime." I nodded slowly. It still felt like I was floating above myself, like this wasn't really happening. "But can I prove it?" I asked. He leaned forward.
"Yes.
"And I think you should. I also think you should prepare for backlash. You're about to shake a tree that's full of snakes." Within a week, we had filed an identity theft and fraud complaint. The forged signature alone was enough to start a case. Samuel filed motions to request the original loan documents from the bank, including any audio or digital recordings. What came back broke my heart and solidified my resolve. There was a voice recording from 6 months ago, confirming the loan. It was my mother pretending to be me. The fake smile I had grown up seeing, the one she wore at church, at school meetings, during family holidays, was gone. In this recording, she sounded cold, robotic. "Yes, I confirm the loan amount and terms. Yes, my name is Emily Carter." My own mother. Lying. For money. Samuel had a copy of the recording played on speaker in his office. When it ended, he simply looked at me and said, "That's your evidence. They don't have a defense." The next phase was hard. We sent a legal notice to my parents' address via certified mail. It contained 3 things. 1, a copy of the fraud report. 2, a formal demand to pay back the loan in full, immediately. 3, a court summons for a preliminary hearing. I expected panic. Instead, I got silence. For 3 days, nothing. No calls. No texts. Then, on the 4th night, my dad showed up at my apartment. He didn't knock gently. He pounded. I opened the door only because Samuel said keeping things documented in person helped. He was shaking. His voice, usually calm and in control, was cracking with every word. "Are you seriously doing this? Taking your own parents to court?" I didn't respond right away. I stepped aside, let him in, and offered no warmth. He walked around the small space, looking like he didn't recognize it. It was clean, modest.
Mine.
He laughed bitterly. "You know, we thought you'd grow out of your little independence phase. But you've really convinced yourself you don't need anyone, haven't you?" I crossed my arms. "You forged my name. You faked my voice. You used me like a credit card, Dad. We were drowning, Emily, he snapped. Do you think we had a choice? The bills, the medical stuff, your mom's job got cut. We were desperate. So you stole from me. Silence. He looked down, then muttered. We figured you'd understand. We're family. And there it was again.
Family.
The word they used as a shield when they were wrong. The leash they tightened whenever I got too far. I walked over to the bookshelf and grabbed a folder Samuel had prepared for me. It was thick.
Heavy.
I handed it to my dad. Actually, you might want to take a look at this before you go any further. He opened it slowly. Inside were copies of the police report, fraud filing, voice analysis report, and a full breakdown of the loan transactions. You forged a federal document, I said. That's prison time. He looked pale, like the floor had vanished under him. Emily, he started, but I raised a hand.
Don't.
Don't pretend to be sorry, because you got caught. That night, I received a voicemail from my mother. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She just said, You've humiliated this family. If you go through with this, we'll never forgive you. I saved it. Sent it to Samuel. Evidence of intimidation. Meanwhile, the case moved forward. The loan company, faced with undeniable proof of fraud, was cooperative. They froze collections and began internal proceedings against my parents. My credit report was in the process of being amended, thanks to the legal steps we took. I had to file reports with the FTC, the credit bureaus, and even submit an affidavit of identity theft. It was exhausting. But every page I signed, every call I made, felt like reclaiming myself. About 2 weeks before the first court hearing, I had a visit I wasn't expecting. My brother's wife, Haley, showed up at my door. We'd never been particularly close. My brother, Matt, always stayed out of family conflict. He lived 2 hours away with Haley and their kids and rarely visited unless it was Thanksgiving or someone's birthday. She looked nervous. I offered her tea, and we sat awkwardly in my small kitchen. Then she said, I didn't come to make excuses for them. I came because I think you should see this. She pulled out a flash drive. They told Matt you gave them permission. That it was your idea. That you were just pretending to be mad because your boyfriend found out or something. I scoffed. Of course they did. He believed them for a while, she said, but I didn't. So I started checking. The flash drive contained screenshots. Bank transfers from the loan funds, used for things like a cruise, home theater equipment, an $8,000 landscaping project. Not bills. Not medicine. Luxury. I cried after she left. But not from sadness. From relief. For the first time, I had proof that it wasn't about survival. They weren't drowning. They were spending my lifeboat to build a deck for their backyard parties. The hearing was brief, but powerful. My parents looked small sitting at the defendant's table. The judge reviewed the voice evidence, the forged signature, and the bank use. My lawyer made the case clear. This wasn't a loan for survival. This was an abuse of trust, identity, and familial power. The judge nodded, then looked at me. Ms. Carter, do you want to press criminal charges or pursue civil damages? I stood up slowly. My heart pounded. This was it. I took a breath and answered clearly. I want both. I'm pressing criminal charges, and I want full civil damages. There was a quiet gasp in the courtroom. My mother's head snapped up. My father clenched his jaw. The judge nodded solemnly, noted it in the record, and scheduled the next set of proceedings. As I stepped out of the courthouse, the sun was warm on my face, but the air around me felt cold. They were really going to hate me now. But I didn't flinch. The next few days were brutal. I got calls from distant cousins I hadn't heard from in years, accusing me of tearing the family apart. My aunt left a voicemail in tears, saying I was sending my own parents to jail over a misunderstanding. One uncle wrote a Facebook post, vague but clearly aimed at me, about how today's generation doesn't understand sacrifice. But I didn't engage. I didn't respond. Let them talk. I knew the truth. What I didn't expect was for Matt to show up unannounced. He looked tired, unshaven. When I opened the door, he gave a small, sheepish smile. Can we talk? We sat down. I didn't offer him anything. No tea, no water. He rubbed his hands together nervously. I believed them, he said quietly. I really did. They said you offered, and that this was all some kind of act to make them feel guilty. I raised an eyebrow. Do you know me at all, Matt?
He sighed.
That's what Haley asked me. He leaned forward. I'm not here to defend what they did. I came to tell you, they're unraveling. Mom cries every day. Dad barely leaves the house. They think you're trying to destroy them. I'm not, I said calmly. I'm trying to reclaim what they stole. He looked up. They want to meet with you. I shook my head. No lawyers. No cameras. No public scene. Just dinner. Mom asked me to try. I hesitated. It felt like a trap, but it also felt like closure. We met at a small, neutral cafe. Not in their house. Not in mine. I wore black. Clean lines. Minimal makeup. Calm. Grounded, untouchable. They were already seated when I walked in. My mom wore sunglasses indoors. My dad looked 10 years older. They didn't stand when I approached. No hugs. I sat across from them and folded my hands. You asked for this, I said. Silence. Then my mom pulled off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red, puffy. We made a mistake, she whispered. I raised an eyebrow. Is that an apology or a defense? Both, my father said quickly. We thought we could pay it back. We thought you wouldn't notice. Or wouldn't fight back, I said. My mom winced. Emily, we didn't know it would go this far. You have to understand. We were just desperate. I interrupted. You booked a cruise. She blinked. What? Don't play dumb. I've seen the statements. Her mouth opened and closed. My dad looked down, guilt flushing his face. Okay, he muttered. So we messed up. But dragging us into court?
What do you gain from that?
Justice, I said. Vengeance. My mom corrected sharply. I smiled. Just a little. I think you're confusing those two things. The conversation turned. They pleaded. They guilt-tripped. My mother said she had given me life, as if that was currency she could use to silence me. My father said I was being cruel. I stayed silent. Let them spiral. Then they pulled their final card. We'll lose the house, my dad said. I looked him in the eye. You should have thought of that before you put it in my name. That shut him up. I stood. Dropped a folder on the table. There's a settlement offer in here, I said. Pay back the full loan within 90 days. I'll drop the criminal charges. They stared at it like it was poison. I walked out. The next week, I got another surprise. A letter, handwritten, from my mother. It didn't apologize. It blamed. She accused me of letting outsiders poison me. Said I was letting Haley twist the family apart. That I was trying to make them grovel. It ended with a single line. You'll regret this when we're gone. I folded it, placed it in a file, and never responded. Meanwhile, something else was changing. Haley. She began texting me small things. I told Matt I want our finances separate now. Seeing what happened to you scared me. I've started looking for part-time work again. I want to have my own emergency fund. Would you want to grab coffee sometime? No pressure. The more I rebuilt, the more she awakened too. Like my fire was lighting hers. But not everything went quietly. When my parents missed their first settlement deadline, we escalated. The court ruled in my favor. The sheriff's department filed a lien on their home. That was the moment they broke. They called Samuel, begging to negotiate. But I didn't back down. Instead, I offered them one last alternative. Sign over the house deed to me. I'll lease it back to you at market rate, and I'll drop all criminal proceedings. It was cold, calculated, but it was fair. They accepted. At the signing, my mother wouldn't look at me. My father whispered, "We never thought you had this in you." I smiled. You never really saw me at all. A week after the deed signing, I visited the house, not as their daughter, but as their new landlord. The air smelled the same, cinnamon, old wood, and faint traces of my childhood. But something had shifted. I wasn't walking in seeking approval. I was walking and owning my space, literally and emotionally. They kept their distance, paid the first month's rent on time. We didn't speak unless absolutely necessary. Still, I watched my mother pause at the window sometimes, looking out like she was waiting for something to change. But she never apologized. Not once. And that was okay, because I had stopped needing it. Instead, I focused on what came next. I started volunteering at a community center for financial abuse survivors, women whose names had been used, stolen, exploited by family. Each story echoed a piece of mine. But as I listened, I realized something deeper. I wasn't alone. My pain wasn't an outlier. It was part of a broken system of silence, guilt, and generational debt. And I wanted to change that. With Samuel's help, I registered a nonprofit. Her credit, her voice. Our mission? To educate young women, especially daughters, on financial autonomy, credit literacy, and boundary building. We partnered with banks, local colleges, and even started offering small legal consultations. Haley became our first volunteer. She handled social media and started hosting online workshops. Watching her step into her own power, it was like watching a mirror repair itself. Matt and I didn't fully reconcile, but something softened. He sent me a text one morning. You were right. No emojis. No elaboration. But I knew what it meant. One chilly evening, I visited the old house again. This time with a repair contractor. The roof needed work. My parents didn't want to move, so I decided to fix it as their landlord. While the contractor measured, I walked through the backyard. The tree house was still there, barely holding together. Memories washed over me. Me and Matt pretending we were pirates, escaping from monsters, building imaginary worlds where we had all the power. I smiled, because now I was building real ones. Later, I met with Haley at a downtown cafe. She brought her laptop, excited about a new logo design for the nonprofit. But somewhere between cappuccinos and ideas, she grew quiet. Can I tell you something? She asked. Always. She looked me straight in the eyes. You gave me permission to want more. For years I thought being a good wife meant tolerating, staying quiet. But you showed me what self-respect actually looks like. I blinked, tears pricking my eyes. She reached across the table and took my hand. You didn't just reclaim your life. You helped me start mine. That night, I sat on my apartment balcony, sipping tea and watching the city lights. Peace felt unfamiliar. Not because I didn't deserve it, but because I had fought so hard for so long, that stillness was a stranger. But in that silence, I remembered something my grandmother once told me. Don't spend your life proving people wrong. Build the life that proves you were always right. And I was doing just that. A month later, something unexpected happened. I got a letter from my mother. This one was different. No blame. No venom. Just honesty. She wrote, I don't expect forgiveness. I barely understand how we became the kind of parents who would do what we did. Maybe we were scared. Maybe we were selfish. Maybe we were broken long before you ever realized. But watching you stand your ground made me confront parts of myself I didn't want to face. I still can't say sorry out loud. But maybe this is the beginning. I folded it, placed it in a drawer. Not because I was ready to forgive her fully, but because I was ready to let go. Weeks later, our nonprofit was featured in a local newspaper. The headline read, Daughter reclaims identity, then helps hundreds do the same. There was a photo of me and Haley, standing side by side, smiling with purpose. We didn't need revenge. We didn't need applause. We had truth, and we had each other. And that was enough. 3 months later, on a cool spring morning, I opened the door to something unexpected. A small bouquet of lavender and eucalyptus. No card. No signature. Just the scent. Familiar and grounding. I didn't need to ask who sent it. My mother's way of saying she remembered. Of saying something wordless, but deeply felt. And that was okay. Because silence, when no longer filled with fear, can feel like peace. My life had changed. I had changed. The courtroom battles were over. The house lease was stable. And her credit, her voice, was thriving beyond anything I had imagined. We had expanded to 3 states, partnered with 2 credit unions, and our online webinars had reached over 10,000 women in under 6 months. We even hosted a local event at the city library called She Reclaims, where survivors shared their stories. Each story was stitched with threads of pain, resilience, and rebirth. One woman, a nurse named Jessica, had her student loans tripled after her father used her info for gambling debt. Another, a young mother named Chanel, was denied housing for her kids because of unpaid utilities opened in her name at age 16. Each time they stood up and spoke, I felt something deeper than victory. Legacy. Not the kind you inherit, the kind you create. On the day of our nonprofit's ribbon cutting for its first official office, I stood with Haley, Matt, and Samuel. The crowd clapped. The mayor shook my hand, and I saw Matt smiling genuinely for the first time in months. "You did this," he whispered. I smiled back. We all did. Later that week, I invited Haley over for dinner. I made lemon garlic pasta, our comfort food, and poured us both a glass of wine. We laughed easily now. No tension. No eggshells. She shared how she was going back to school, finally pursuing her graphic design degree. "I lost a lot of time," she admitted, "but I'm done living behind someone else's plans." She raised her glass. To second chances. I raised mine. To becoming a version of ourselves they never imagined. That night, as I cleaned up, I found an old recipe card tucked in the back of my spice drawer. Handwritten. Grandma's molasses cookies. The ink was fading, but the message at the bottom still glowed. Sugar doesn't make it sweet. Love does. I sat on the kitchen floor, the card in my hand, and let tears fall freely. Because healing isn't a straight line. It's moments like this, quiet, simple, real. 6 months after the final court decision, I got another message. This one came from my father. Not a letter. A voicemail. His voice was tired.
Softer.
"Emily, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I wanted to say I watched that interview you did, the one on TV.
You spoke well.
Better than I ever could. And I realized you didn't become strong in spite of us. You became strong because you had to survive us. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I hope life gives you every bit of the peace we never did." I didn't return the call. I didn't have to, because the truth finally echoed back from the one place I thought it never would. By winter, her credit, her voice had helped clear over $2.5 million in fraudulent debt for clients. Our mission had caught the attention of national news. I was invited to speak at a financial summit in New York. I stood on a stage, looking out at a sea of powerful women, bankers, activists, mothers, daughters. And I began my speech with the words, "My name was stolen by the 2 people who gave it to me, but that name now funds freedom. That name now means power. That name now saves lives." After the applause, a young woman came up to me, barely 19, teary-eyed. "You don't know me," she said, "but I saw your video online. I didn't even know what financial abuse was until you told your story. My mom used my name to open 5 credit cards, but I'm fighting back now. Because of you." She hugged me, not like a fan hugs a speaker, but like a daughter hugs the mother she never had. And I held her like a sister. Because that's what healing women do, we hold each other up. One crisp evening, as snow dusted the streets, I walked by my old house. The lights were on. A soft jazz tune floated through the window. And for the first time, I smiled. Not with bitterness, but with closure. They were surviving, and I was thriving. Both things could be true. The new year brought more change. I moved into a brownstone near the nonprofit office. It had a sunroom, big windows, and a little garden I'd been wanting since forever. I painted the walls warm gold and olive green, hung framed quotes from Maya Angelou and bell hooks, planted herbs in mason jars by the window. Every corner whispered one word, reclaimed. And then came the final full circle. One afternoon, while preparing for a podcast interview, I revisited my grandmother's voice notes, short memos she'd left me before she passed. In one, Her voice crackled through my headphones. Sweet girl, life's gonna try to shrink you. Make you feel like you owe the world silence just because they changed your diapers. Don't fall for it.
Speak.
Even if your voice shakes. I smiled and whispered back. I did, Grandma. I finally did. The podcast aired 2 weeks later. Within a day, it had over 300,000 plays. Messages poured in, some from strangers, some from old friends, and one from a teacher who had taught me in 8th grade. I always knew you were lightning in a quiet storm. I'm proud of the woman you became. So here I am. Not perfect, not untouched, but powerful. My name was once stolen. My future nearly crushed by the very hands that were meant to hold me. But I rebuilt, brick by brick, boundary by boundary, love by earned love. And now I stand, not in revenge, but in victory. It's Sunday morning. The windows are open. A soft breeze dances through the curtains. There's a batch of molasses cookies baking in the oven. Lavender sits in a jar beside fresh mint leaves I just clipped from the garden. And as the tea steeps and a bird sings on the windowsill, I whisper a quiet prayer. Not for justice, not for apologies, but for peace. The kind you earn after setting fire to every lie they built around your worth and walking barefoot into your own sunrise.